might, it's still investigated, it will not be.
No, the guy was there, so that's, yeah. I see.
Or properly spaced on the TV.
Do you have an accident at the curb?
Pardon?
At the curb?
Hit the tree, no, on my field. Like, and flipped his car.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, everybody. Okay, we all set? Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, Board of Selectmen regular meeting. It's on Tuesday because Monday was Labor Day. So I'd like to start with the call to order. Candace, please.
Candace Bouchard,
Todd Oshalashi.
Melissa Bird.
Bob Geiger.
Candy Perez.
Sheila Sedlak,
Jack Borg.
Stephen Sedlak.
Linda Grappo.
Okay, thank you. Please join us for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 3 is agenda review. Bob, did you have something?
I did. On item D, it was refunds, which we usually have here. It's my fault, I should have checked it earlier. I found a significant error in there in terms of how it was put together. So I'm pulling that off the agenda and put it on next one. Nothing critical, it can't wait.
That's our usual monthly item anyway, so we could do it at the end of the month. Anything else from anyone? If not, we'll move to item 4, which is minutes of our regular meeting on August 17th, 2020. May I have a motion to approve? Thank you, Candace. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you, Melissa. Any corrections or anything for Sheila?
Candy,
Yes.
I had 2 things. On the first page, where it talks about being a Zoom meeting, I didn't put in that the attendants were in person. And on page 2, 11D, where Steve recused himself, it was for conflict of interest. So I want to make those corrections.
Okay, so everybody got those two? If you didn't hear her, she's putting in the correction that everybody was here in person. As you notice, our meetings have transitioned back into in-person meetings. So full in person, I imagine at the end of this, the next meeting we have will be just full, as they were always regular meetings. And then the second thing was Steve Sedlak did recuse himself when we had a discussion on the education item. If there's no other changes, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next one is the special meeting on August 17th, 2020. I believe that was a town meeting on the land exchange there with the easement. So may I have a motion to approve that?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second? Thank you, Linda. Any corrections or anything for that? Anyone? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. Brings us to the town manager's report. Matt?
All right, to start with August the 24th, the week of August the 24th, I met Monday with Public Works. We've actually had a couple meetings regarding Whiting Street and the public hearings and the plans for the Whiting Street reconstruction. Also, we met a couple times and viewed the Overlook Road site, which is now completed. If all of you want to see an example, I think Jimmy brought it up before, but it's now complete. That was about a $500,000 project, and that's the way we'd like all our roads to look at some point in time. I also met with Police Chief Fitzgerald regarding special requests for traffic control issues that we've had in some sites for public meetings. I also had a site visit to our industrial park regarding a new tenant. Hitchcock Chair has just relocated a significant 10,000-foot square piece in the, on Grappo Drive at the industrial park there, so that's a nice addition to our town. Tuesday, I met with Public Works regarding, in this room, we had potential grievance issues. I met with a couple of hours with the Public Works Union over work rules and hiring and personnel issues associated with that. That's an ongoing issue which we hope to resolve here by next week. I also met with the Police Chief Fitzgerald regarding the Torrington had a computer hack breach which caused us some heartburn here in Town Hall. It was a computer hack into Torrington, which backed up through LCD and back into our telephone system. They notified us immediately. We instantly took measures, shut down where necessary, but we did not get infiltrated by that virus. And later in that afternoon, we were back up to normal capacity. It was interesting in Torrington. The FBI responded to that, their cyber unit instantly as well. They didn't, I don't know the complete assessment of their damages, but they were minimal. As you may have heard today, also the Hartford school system got hacked. And they contend that it delayed their school opening by 1 day, but they're up and operating. But just for so all of you aware out there, don't open anything from somebody that looks the least bit suspicious. So anyway, just to let you know, that was kind of caused us some heartburn on Tuesday, but we're in good shape. Also met with a resident from Highland Lake regarding property issues. I tend to meet with a resident from Highland Lake almost once a week regarding property issues, property lines, developmental, planning and zoning issues, building code issues. There's quite a bit of activity going on at the lake in terms of development, and also frequently neighbor-to-neighbor issues.
Sorry. I just was checking that. I have to shut it off. There you go.
All right, thank you.
Does that sound?
And then I also have had a telephone conference regarding our senior apartment issues as we're going through some financial reorganization as a result of tax investors in one of our, as you know, we have 4 different part of our senior complex is 4 different units over there. One of them just completed a tax investment 14-year credit, and we're going through, it's interesting when the attorneys put all these deals together, and they usually conclude in 15 to 20 years. No one really worries about the conclusion of the deal until it arrives. So we're in the process of trying to untangle one of them. Wednesday, I met with Fire Chief Sartrana and on the possibility of tonight's appointment of another fully paid fire chief, who will be James Lagasse as the candidate, and you all have that paperwork tonight. According to our town charter, they're interviewed and reviewed and selected by the volunteer organization, and that process has been completed. And I think you have the recommendation in front of you. It's the only paid position we have. It reports to the town that is selected by, is not selected by the town manager or the selectmen. But the process does say that you as selectmen will make the appointment, even though you don't have anything to do with the process of the final selection, nor do I. But that's all I can do is assure you that it was done with a lot of care, thoroughly, and over several weeks and a few months. So there was a lot of involvement. I'll be happy to get into that more as it comes up here on the agenda. I also met with the Land Use Office regarding planning and zoning commission updates. Again, I know Jack has worked hard before. We need commission members. Just keep that in mind. I'm worried about inland wetlands. I think planning and zoning, we're keeping staffed up, but we don't have a lot of candidates. I also met with Norfolk Road residents regarding real estate and tax issues. We've got a couple of, Norfolk Road is really Route 44 going outside of town. We've had a couple properties out there for sale for a few years. Kevin Nelligan is working with us to merge the 2 properties into one owner. The town has never owned them, nor does the town want to own them, but we now have a buyer has purchased one and is in the process of purchasing the second one, which will clear up any remaining tax issues as the town get their back taxes paid for those 2 buildings. I met with our finance director regarding personnel issues in his area as we continue to staff up and try to pick up speed there. As you heard the last meeting, our tax collection's been right on target, and even a hair ahead of last year. I also talked with several other towns as we were all anticipating having our taxes being delayed significantly by residents. I talked to New Hartford today, and Norfolk. Everyone's taxes are being paid on time, so we're all a bit taken aback. We're pleased with that, and thank everybody out there for having paid their taxes. We have hired just a temporary Friday afternoons only an additional tax assessor to fill in right now, to fill in some gaps and holes, and to go after some assessments we think should be completed, which have not been done in the past couple of years. So we're going after any tax money which we have not received that we feel we should have. I also had a conference call that day with Bill Ryan, our labor attorney, regarding labor issues on a couple of contracts that we haven't completed. The police contract, it's close to completion now. Thursday, I did a site visit regarding some tree removals. Trees have become a bigger issue this year after this last storm, and more trees came down, and there are more ash trees dying than had been anticipated. As you know, we're losing them all. I'm facing a bit of a dilemma. We seem to have a bigger demand for tree removal than we have budget right now. I'll try to address that with you all in the next several weeks. I also met with Bruce Stafford, Attorney Bill Ryan, and Lori regarding personnel issues as we try to resolve some that have come up recently within the contract. Friday, I met with Don Stein, the first selectman of Barkhamsted, regarding the sewer agreement, which I believe is almost completed now. As you know, we intend to provide water and sewer down to the border of our town with Barkhamsted, and they're going to pay for they're really paying for the whole thing. It's a $2 million project. The owner of the shopping center, the small shopping center, what's the name of the shopping center? Ledgebrook.
No, excuse me.
Not Ledgebrook.
Mallory Brook.
Brook Plaza was purchased last year. They don't have water and sewer. They need that for development of the property, and the current owner is working with Barkhamsted. She's going to probably pay for a significant portion of that. So we need the customer. We have the water and sewer availability. It's another customer which will help us in terms of maintaining our own facilities. I also met with Attorney Nelligan regarding the final development of the helipad easement for the hospital. There was a tax issue involved in terms of easement, and I think I presented that to you last week. I think we've concluded everything we need to do right now for the helipad. I don't know if you've driven by, but they've made rapid progress here in the past month, so it's starting to look like there's a place to land a helicopter back there, and the building itself is looking pretty good. They still plan a January opening. This week, Monday, I met with Public Works, which I've been meeting almost with every day regarding updates on all the road development we're trying to continue with. Had a departmental supervisors meeting, which we haven't had one in person. We did that in this room, and everyone spread out a good 7 or 8 feet from each other, just to make sure we kind of missed the face-to-face meetings. We've tried them, Zooming them, but they're not as effective as face-to-face, where people are more inclined to ask questions and contribute information. I also met with the attorney for the Lodestar Solar Project. I met with our attorney. We probably had 5 or 6 Zoom meetings. The contract is in here. We'll get into that. We'll discuss that. There's been a lot of work put forward to this. I'll explain to you all how we tried to initially resist the project, and I'll explain to you the siting committee and the final contract, which we believe is the best for the town. I'll talk about that when we come to that next, or in one of the items here. Tuesday, I met with Bruce Stafford, again, just regarding what's going on in his department and trying to enhance the viability of it, and that was part of the temporary tax assessor part-time, which is just on Fridays. Met with Public Works regarding our tree budget, which I just mentioned to you. Met with our labor attorney again regarding personnel issues and contract issues with the Public Works Department. Wednesday, I met with our school superintendent regarding school construction issues. I think we've got a hearing coming up over the Hinsdale land issue in our disagreement with Gilbert over that, the back part of that land issue. Although seems like this has been going on for a long time. We've got another one coming up here shortly. I had a site visit regarding sidewalk issues. Sidewalks continue to be a big issue in our town. Our sidewalks, we've got a lot of sidewalks in need of serious repair. The last sidewalk study we did said we had about a $7 to $8 million issue with sidewalk replacements. Unfortunately, over the past 25 or 30 years, we haven't enforced our sidewalk responsibility issue, which is the responsibility of the homeowner is responsible for the sidewalks. In some cases, the town shares that responsibility with some common borders, the town contributes, but in any case, right now, we need to develop a sidewalk maintenance issue going forward. I'm talking about concrete replacement, not shoveling snow. Thursday, I met with Steve Williams regarding some sub-grant funds. I've got one piece in here which I'm going to share with you, which is issued by Steve Williams but controlled through the COG. I'll explain what that is briefly. We do it every year. I met with the Public Works Union representing and one of their representatives regarding the civil service promotion process. And I had a site visit and review of blight concern at 15 Upson Roads. As you can imagine, whenever we issue a blight issue, most of the times the owners don't really agree with us, which results in some discussions in hopes of reparation of the issue. And that's it. I've got the departmental updates listed there for all the things that are coming in the future, but any questions on what I did the past 2 weeks?
Bob, since you mentioned it twice, the discussion of tree removal, both in the Thursday and then again the following Tuesday, does this also involve the trees that were in the cemetery?
Yes.
So the difficulty of getting those trees out of there and...
Yeah, it's just the cost and the time. And it seems to be, as I talk to other towns, we all tend to put off tree removal until it comes down, which is unfortunate because it's more expensive and causes damage. This last storm, brought to light a lot of our issues. And so we've sat down and spent more time kind of assessing where we need to have more trees removed. And there are a lot of them out there. And
Are we under any liability because the stones were crushed by the tree that fell? And
Not
apparently there was some issue of those trees were to be removed several months before?
anything that caused the damage, it is our responsibility to repair that, and we will do so.
Have you gotten any complaints from people regarding their headstones being replaced?
No, I haven't, but I'm sure we try to be proactive. We notice when the trees are down, we have a cemetery attendant, and we record what was damaged and develop a plan to go repair those.
Okay, so do we have an active program going to take place in the next several months?
Oh, yes, we do. We have an active tree removal program. I think after the storm, we realized it's not big enough, so we're in the process of trying to expand it.
I think it's important to say how much money we already have in it. Don't we have 50,000?
We have $50,000 in it now.
But we need like 200.
I think it's insufficient, given the nature of what we saw this last storm.
So from 50 to 200 is
And one other question that came up, in the department updates in the community planning and development, there was a noted that multifamily inspection shut down except for code violations. Does that create any potential liability that we're not doing multifamily inspections unless there is a code violation?
Well, it's a potential liability. We have to inspect 3 units or more. There's an annual basis of which we do checking. We're going to increase those again, but I think there's always a liability if the town's responsible for an inspection that doesn't occur. So it's our intent to increase the inspections on multiple unit dwellings.
Will that require perhaps adding some more staff?
It may require some temporary help We currently have a temporary building official,
Right.
Bill Volosky, who's an experienced building official and has been kept pretty busy, and he'd like to keep doing that work, so it's our intention to do that. So we'll, and Steve Williams is also responsible for inspections, and as you can imagine, he was pretty busy during our last, he's our emergency manager as well. So, yeah, we're behind on building inspections, but we need to catch up.
Okay.
What's the status of Whiting Street? Is that past all of the boards and commissions?
It really has got, we've still got 2 more conversations to be had, particularly with the people that own the apartments. We're trying to make sure that we've got the best consensus we have in terms of moving forward on it. As you know, with the grant, it's not enough to do the entire street, but there've been a lot of discussion on whether it should be one-way, two-way. We've had our emergency management teams involved. We've had 2 public sessions, and we're having individual sessions with owners. There's 26 homes involved, and obviously American Mule Project and Whiting Mills, and also the apartment complex across from Whiting Mills. So there's more, we're trying to have as many discussions as possible to make sure we've got the best possible buy-in we can have. So, but it's ready. Our initial plans are developed and drawn up and ready to go.
So why wasn't that done beforehand, before it got to?
Well, we've had a lot of discussions beforehand. I guess it's like anything else. People hear the discussions, and then when it gets down to the wire, they want to have more discussion. So we've been having discussions for the past year. And as we go through this now, we realize maybe we should have had more discussions and invited more groups to join. But there are, as we've gotten into it in more depth, there are varying agendas. The people at Strong Terrace, I don't know if you where that is, right at the end, there's 26 homes up there, and I think they have now become recently involved, as well as the people that own the apartment. And part of the issue was to do the project the way that everyone would like to have it done. There just wasn't enough money. So we had to make some compromises, and that's what we're discussing now. It's about $500,000 that the state gave us. But it wasn't enough to do even what the state asked us to do. They wanted a sidewalk on both sides of the street. There's just not enough room for that, or enough money for that.
Well, the state doesn't use that road. It's our road, so they can't force us to put a sidewalk on both sides.
Yeah, nothing to the state.
The state has a lot to say about what we do relative to the safety of the road with the money they've given us. So they've worked with this fairly well, but they had suggested things that just were beyond the scope of the budgetary requirements that we have.
The only thing that the state would get involved in is the entrance or exit to it off of 44, but not the road itself.
Oh, you still have to follow state code and building codes. This all has to be submitted for approval by the state because it's their money. So they're not about to approve money that they don't think that the working conditions or safety conditions are appropriate. They have a lot of say in it. If it's their money, there's a lot of say. It comes with strings. But I think it's been designed very well. Our engineer and our outside engineering firm that was hired, I think they've done a very thorough job on the amount that we can do. We're basically doing about half to 2/3 of the street. As you know, we did a temporary pave on it last year, which people were pleased with, but that was only temporary. As you know, there's drainage, and it's drainage, sidewalks, lighting, crosswalks. There was a lot of controversy about it being one-way or two-way. I don't know if you've ever driven out Whiting Street and tried to come onto Route 44 and turn left. I still think that's very dangerous.
Almost impossible.
It's easy to turn right, it's not easy to turn left. But we can get into controversy. We had the fire department, police department, ambulance department, and residents, and particularly people at Strong Terrace. One of the issues is with one of the biggest controversies on making it one-way was you could come out and make it one-way coming into Whiting Street off 44, but exiting people would go out and go up Holabird Avenue and turn right on Colony Drive. And I assure you the people on Colony Drive are not happy about that thought.
Or they could go left and go down around the park.
They could. They could, but if you're on your way to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know what's going to happen. So there's been a lot of controversy on the traffic flow, is more than anything else, one-way versus two-way. And even though fire departments and police departments and ambulance drivers are allowed to go down one-way streets in an emergency, they don't like doing it, and it's not recommended.
I have two things I want to ask about is, one, if you could talk about the police, the training they did today, which I think is a really good thing.
Yes.
That they did the mental health training for all of the people that work
We
in our,
did.
that. And then the other thing too is Steve Williams gave us a communication plan that we had asked for a couple weeks ago. So if you could just review that a little bit for us too.
Okay, on mental health training, we're having two sessions. We started with only our police department, because it was aimed primarily, this particular session. We did a session today at Pearson School with about police and anybody related to the police department by a mental health organization that currently assists over 59 police departments in the state. I don't know how many fire departments. And they also had a retired police officer who's very experienced with the mental health issues. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're going to do the same session again. It's 2.5 hours. I address the group initially, and then the professionals come in and do their studies. Then the police chief and myself both extract ourselves from the meeting in order to not inhibit the conversation between everybody in the room. All I can say, I sat through the first 45 minutes of it. It's very impressive. The police right now are going through a lot of stress all over the country, as you know. You read the papers. Stressful situations. Among police officers, alcoholism, drugs, nervous breakdowns, and divorces is much higher than the general population. That is a particular job that comes with a lot of stress and creates issues. And now we have the public sector and the reaction right now to police around the country. You've heard about the defunding situation. There have been some horrendous situations involving police officers. I'm not saying it was all correct, but in any case, everyone gets painted with the same broad brush. And the chief and I believe that our officers need some support as well as training in terms of how to deal with the amount of stress that they're under. So I think that's good for our police department, it's good for the public, it's good for all of us in general. And that spreads back to their families and to the rest of the community. So we're going to be concentrating a lot more on mental health assistance and evaluation. So tomorrow, again, the other half of the department will meet at 1 o'clock, and I'll meet with them again in the morning. So I believe it's the right thing to do, and it seemed to be getting pretty active support. All the officers are in attendance, as well as any of the staff, detectives, and other support personnel.
So is this one-off, or are you gonna write a press release on this? Is this going to be happening quarterly? Is this,
No, we're going to evaluate how it goes first. We're working with the professionals that run this right now. I mean, they've been doing it for a long time, over 30 years.
establish?
We're going to try to establish a procedure. We're trying to say, in how much depth can we go? All of us are experiencing during this COVID thing, and just from my position as the town manager this past 4 months, people are under a lot of stress, all of us. And so first we're trying to deal with the first responders and the type of stress they're going through, and we'll decide how much farther we'll take it and where we'll go with it. We'll kind of evaluate the success of it and see where we go from there. But we weren't going to publicize this particularly yet. I mean, we're not going to try to hide it, but we want people to participate. So right now, we'll step up the publicity on this as we move forward, as we evaluate how it's going. There's a tendency for people not to want to ask for help, and that's what this session was about today. You know,
That's why we have sexual harassment classes. They become the fabric of organizations. So, I mean, this is a fabulous piece to do on, I think, on a regular basis.
it might, yeah, we will do that. We're going to take the guidance from the pros that run it, and we'll get, I think they're the best ones to guide us through the development and expansion of the efforts.
And then the communication plan?
Okay, I asked Steve Williams we've had a couple of sessions about how to communicate during emergencies. Of course, the best time to do it is after an emergency when you realize everything that didn't go well. So Steve has worked with Region 5 and other people dealing with emergency communications. And I want you all to take a look at this. There's 4 pages here. It could have been we missed something, I'm not sure, but we spent a lot of time developing it. Steve Williams, I think, has done a terrific job on garnering all the information and all the critique that we provided to him and to Region 5. So that's what this is a communications plan. There have been a lot of communication plans. This is takes advantage of the most recent issues that we've had. So just take a look at it and feel free to add notes, correct it, come back to me with it, and we'll keep developing it until we.
So one of the things I noticed in there is that the appointment early on as the disaster is approaching, like the storm, whether it's a hurricane, snowstorm, or everything, is to name a public information officer. And he also is gonna activate the CERT team, and then the CERT team might act as sending some information out, but it also lists that all the information has to go out through the town manager. So there probably should be some backups in there, like to the town manager or whoever's acting that day. Let's say that you were out of town or something.
Yeah, we will be sure and do that like we do on anything.
But I think the most important thing on there is that early on, a public information officer is named so that the information can get out there as soon as possible.
It was not only early on, as we found out Steve was sick.
Right.
So this has to be done 48 hours or more before
Right.
anything happens. That you have to have both the PIA and the
Well, I'd like you to read this as you're coming up with suggestions now. Just jot notes. You've got a copy. Jot notes and come back to us with any criticisms or ideas that you might have.
So what Steve is proposing here, and he says on page 4, his final comment, it requires more than one person to accomplish the task. Are we anticipating that person that we identified as a position in our last meeting be that person to work with him?
Could be, but not necessarily. Could be. It's and not necessarily one. I noticed, even though you don't see it, when Steve was here, there were usually 2 or 3 of us working all the time. When Steve went out, I mean, those pieces were picked up. There's always, when the crisis occurs, the team tends to form, particularly if Steve did a good job of the leadership, and I think a police chief was involved, I was involved.
Well, I think this report is very comprehensive. I'm just questioning, how does this relate to the position that we supported last meeting?
That was more, it was information for sure, but it wasn't a leadership job. It was more of an information communication position. But we could, depending on who we get, that could be made part of the plan.
So are we saying that the position that we approved and is supposed to be the 15th of this month where all applications come in, that's more of an implementation position as opposed to
It's not an emergency manager position.
First, it's informational assessment of what our needs are and how to implement a communication plan. This is an incident.
Well, Steve does a pretty good job here of showing us what we should be doing.
Right, so what should happen is when you have an EOC, your Emergency Operations Center is gonna have all different pieces to it. You know, so there's different pieces of communication, different pieces of what people are doing, what DEMIS 5 does, what everybody does. The part that was missing in the last hurricane, was the public information piece. So the idea is to correct that. So in the Emergency Operations Center that Bob has to make sure that is in place, Steve is the director of that, they need to identify a person that's going to be that public information officer, public information person, whatever you want to call them. And they're going to have that set up pre-storm, pre-emergency, all the way through to the end. And Steve could be giving out some of that information because he caught up with some of that 3 or 4 days after that. But there should always, like even in schools, when we're in schools, everybody has a role. You know, like all the administration has a role of what they would do during an incident. It should be the same way here. I think what happened is that Steve kind of became the only person that was the communicator. Then when he got sick, and then the internet wasn't here, and there wasn't a plan for it, that's why the information didn't go out. So having an information person, and then the other part in there too, that we'll have to put in there is what happens if there is no communication availability from town hall. Where's the backup then? Do you go to the satellite truck that Demis had and use that? Do you go find a place, you know, on the other side of town, downtown, somewhere like that to be able to hook up and be able to communicate? So I think there's still a little bit further to go. But Jack, the person we're gonna hire is grant funded. It's only $12,000 a year. That person may or may not, let's say, be scheduled during an incident. If we could use that person, they're an expert in communications, I would imagine that we would. But it's also something that during the incident, might be somebody else that does it with at least a civil service page, I would think. So, and then we gotta get the little plans in place and the little things in place. Like we don't have, like Steve in here. In this plan here, it talks about the Winston Facebook pages. We don't have an official Facebook page. For us to go monitor the Facebook pages or put things where other people are controlling them, they all have different administrators. Some have been set up by one person, some have been set up by other persons. But there's got to be, like, as we all want, an official town page so that Winston Civil Preparedness is official, so that official information comes out through official pages. And then people can share those to the other pages. I think that's really important to do on that. So we need to get the structure set up and then follow with this, I think this, what you started to outline. And maybe it's something that, you know, maybe it's something, Bob, that we have to pay, you know, that when there's an incident coming up, just like we pay Steve to be the emergency management operations, maybe we need to pay somebody that during incidents on a per day, per hour, whatever it is, that's gonna do this piece of things. And it becomes their responsibility to do it. So make sure it happens.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. And my only comment was, this is a pretty comprehensive report on what can be done and who can do it. And I'm just trying to see, how do we meld this into our suggestion last month, or last meeting, to hire somebody to do
I have
some
a,
public relations?
how many people are involved with the your CERT team? Your teams, your emergency teams? How many people? Do you have volunteers or?
Well, we've got, the teams are regional. So at any given moment, within Region 5, they're probably talking 20-some people with, it depends on how far you want to extend it. I mean, down to emergency first responders.
I'm talking about our town, just our town.
Yeah, our town, you're talking probably 4 or 5 people.
Just
directly
4 or
involved.
5 people?
And who are also communicating with others who can come help them whenever they need it. And we've got sufficient people. It was the instrumentation was the bigger issue, not the lack. We didn't lack personnel.
They go through training courses too.
Say again?
They go through training courses.
Yes, they do.
That's how they become part of the team.
We've had that session in here. We've had over 25 people in here doing EOC training for various pieces, all the way down to the ambulance and
The
police
information
department.
we have, it's not
Yeah.
getting out.
Okay, anything else? If not, we move to item 6, citizens' comments. Would anybody like to speak? John? Steve will give you the microphone.
Yes, John Weird at 16 Superior Street. Whoops. John Weird at 16 Superior Street, Winston. I don't know whether it's gonna ever be solved, but I think what we have to try and do for people that are entering Whiting Street from the east headed west, we need to slow them down. Because I was on Whiting Street the other day, gonna make a right turn, and I didn't think the guy was gonna miss me coming down the hill. He was going so fast. And also, I think they need to have a no turn on red coming off the northbound lane turning right to go westbound. Because those people, they look left, and if they see a car nose, they zoom out, they don't even stop for the red light. They're right through it, bing, right, one car after another. Because I was in the left lane gonna go east the other day, and I noticed that. Very few cars slow down enough where they could stop. They just keep coming and coming and coming, which lets the flow keep flowing, because when it does turn the other way, up where they go to New Hartford, the old New Hartford Road, it's just one continuous line of traffic. And nobody in their mind is gonna cut in front of that when they take a left, headed eastbound on 44, coming out of Dunkin' Donuts. That's why they always try and make a U-turn, but that's a bad time to make a U-turn too.
The U is illegal also.
Well, yes, that and that portion, but it should be illegal anywhere on Main Street, a U-turn, as far as I'm concerned. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else for public comment? Anyone?
Did you give the phone number?
So 738-6958. Okay, moving on to correspondence. Anyone?
Are we going to talk about the August 22nd letter from Allison Shea? That was correspondence sent to, regarding the Suckerbrook Dam project?
She's also FOI the information too, so, I mean, if you want to talk about it, go ahead.
Just wondering, that she had asked in her letter to discuss it. What's the status of the potential litigation?
That's her public comment.
Well,
And in the meantime, she's FOI'd it. So Kevin is responding.
okay.
We've not taken any legal action. We've not voted to take any legal action.
All right. I didn't see that as an FOI.
Oh, because she FOI'd it to
Afterwards.
afterwards, after that. All right. 8 boards and commissions, Steve.
There's no action we have to take on resignations or appointments this evening, but there's been an ongoing question about one of the members of the EDC, and I've learned that there are 2 members of the EDC who are in a similar circumstance. They've been attending the meetings via Zoom, because that's all they've had is Zoom meetings, no in-person meetings. Both people are property owners here in town. One of them has notified us that she's renovating property and going to move to the town. I don't know what her current status is, how many days a week she lives here, if any. And there was a question of full-time residency of the other person as well. So I don't know if you want.
Steve, it's in wetlands, it's wetlands, not
Okay,
EDC.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you for the correction.
Okay.
So I don't know, do you want the selectmen to take any action in terms of talking with these people, or what was your?
The question came up, and I suppose you're gonna have to ask Kevin about this, is that, does a person have to be a resident here to be on boards and commissions? We know that on inland wetlands, one person is a business owner here and is in town for the business. But the question came up through other people that there was somebody that owned property here but was not living here. And they wanted to know if that was okay or not.
Okay, well, we're going on the basis, the appointment was made with the understanding that the residency was not an issue, that the person's a property owner. However, if you want to authorize me to talk to Kevin Nelligan about this, or authorize Bob.
Go ahead and check with Kevin on that if you want.
So the question is when the Zoom meetings end, because what happens is, in the one person that owns a business here in town, she attends those inland wetlands meetings. She physically comes here and does it. So when the Zoom meetings end, will that person or both people, will they attend the meetings in person?
Yeah,
Or are they always gonna be, try to attend electronically, which I don't think that we have, policy on only electronic, because you're not here.
right.
You know, you're not in town, you don't come through. So is that, what happens when that happens? When you meet in person, the person's never gonna come in person?
Okay, so Bob, am I gonna contact Kevin or
I'll
you?
take care of it.
You are?
So it's basically, if somebody's never gonna attend in person, can they be on a commission that's meeting in person? Be like one of us, all we did was attend by electronically. Would that be okay?
Right, but
And not
again,
even live here?
the original appointment was made on the basis that the person that you're talking about right now was going to move here in the near future. And, you know, I have no idea whether that's taken place or not.
Well, we don't either, that's why we asked the question.
Right.
I'll verify that.
That's what was asked.
I'd like to take another action here if I could. Under boards and commissions, Steve, I know that there's 2 alternate positions open on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And if you look at the minutes of the Zoning Board of Appeals, they're pretty busy. They have a lot of action. So I would like to put the name of David Carter for consideration as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay, you've talked to him and he's willing and, okay.
Yep.
So this will be step 1 of our process.
This will be
of
step 1.
Acknowledging his interest.
Yes.
Okay, then
He's
we'll-
already, I've already talked to him about his interest. He is interested. He used to, at one point, be on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And right now, he's on the School Building Committee.
Oh, I thought the name was familiar. Okay. Good, well, that'll make it easier to vet.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
So that's step 1, putting his name forward for consideration. I know I talked to the chairman of the ZBA, and they have 2 openings, at least 2 openings on the alternates side.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure the minutes reflect you're putting that name forward. That would be it otherwise.
All right, so under new business, the agreement for the 2020 Homeland Security grant program, Bob?
We address this each year, and required to do so by the COG. The COG is the centerpiece that all of our 21 towns go to when we think we need a piece of equipment, which we don't need all the time, but occasionally. And right now, for emergency and public protection, there's a lot of equipment that many towns use at various times, but not all at the same time. And what this is a request for you to approve us maintaining the current agreement. It's all grant funded, it's none of the town's money, but we have 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that we use. Some of our lighted signs, some special one-time traffic control usage equipment we have for different events, sometimes emergency lighting, but this is shared by all the towns, and all the equipment is usually housed in one particular town and is sent to another town when they request to use it, and the same thing applies to us if we need equipment. So this is just a big sharing agreement amongst all 21 towns in the COG to share emergency equipment that is acquired through grants which are pursued by the COG. So this is just, as your neighbor bars your ladder and fails to return it, you know where it is if you need it, kind of thing. So I'm requesting that you approve our continual annual sharing request.
I'll motion.
Okay, yeah, just put that resolution.
Are you
number.
ready? Resolution?
Yeah, just for the record, just put that resolution.
I
number.
move that the Board of Selectmen adopt resolution number 20-05.
Thank you, Candace. Anybody have any more questions for Bob?
So Bob, the term custodial owner really means that we take care of the equipment and it's stored by us, maintained by us, and used by the other
By
towns.
anyone else who needs it, correct.
Okay.
It's also the cog too, right?
It's also the cog, and there's other equipment that we use that other towns maintain and hold, so there's a whole list of equipment.
Okay, no other questions? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Okay, B is the appointment and acceptance of the chief of the Winchester Fire Department.
So let me explain here, as you know, we budgeted for a fully paid, full-time fire chief. The process, according to our town charter, is really controlled by the volunteer fire department. They set up an interviewing panel of volunteers from our own department and experienced chiefs from other fire departments. So a panel was set up. The job was advertised. There were several applicants, several qualified applicants, and then the fire department's review board interviewed them all, went through a selection process, and in this case, they came up with a candidate who happens to be the one they selected, happens to be the one who's probably most familiar with our town. He's been our fully paid fireman in town here for a number of years now, Jamie Lagasse, and they have recommended him for the fire chief role. The process seems a little strange to me, but that's the way our charter works. So I don't do the selection, you all don't do the selection. They, as a volunteer group, go through the process, do the selection, and then come to you with the proposal that he be appointed, and that's what we have here. What kind of questions might I ask you? This is, financially, it's well within the budget. It's a 3-year contract. The 3-year contract is the same as all salaried personnel that we currently have that are non-union salaries managers. And I'll be happy to share that contract with all of you. It just seems strange to me that the sole decision for the hiring is really rests with their recommendation.
What are we doing about the paid position?
Then the one
Paid
that-
driver position?
Then the paid driver position, which Jamie currently holds, we will then go to civil service to advertise that. That's a union position, so we will then go backfill that position as we would any other position in town.
And that could take
That could take.
a couple months.
It could take several weeks.
What, does he retain both responsibilities?
I'll leave that to David, and he will work that out. And we wanted to make sure that we had the approval process completed, but it's very doable, because right now David will stay on. He's been really assisting, he's virtually been the assistant police or fire chief since the past couple of
David
years.
Saturano will stay on.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a smooth transition. I don't believe this will cause any issues as we backfill his position.
But you also make a temporary appointment.
Yeah, I can, within the department, they can come to me with someone they think can fill it temporarily, and I'm sure they have someone.
Okay, just a clarification. The proposed motion said September 1st, but David Saturano's letter says September 16th. Is that a misprint? Or are we
No.
talking about September 16th or September 1st as the appointment date?
Well, September the 1st was the appointment date. We had to come to you first. So we had to, so until we come to you first, we can't really do anything. So that's what the date conflict was.
So it's effective the 16th.
It's effective the 16th.
It's effective
The 16th.
as of,
16th,
as of the 16th.
right,
So he starts getting paid under that salary as of the 16th.
yes.
Bob, is there a job description for the fire chief?
There is, and I'd be happy to distribute that package. Because it was a contract, we didn't distribute it publicly, but we could have and maybe should have. But I've got the whole thing complete in order to send out to you all. I'd be happy to do that with the job description and the whole contract.
Yeah.
Been
And I-
reviewed by both the attorneys and the department and the existing fire chief.
And in your report under department updates, under fire, it said membership has dropped. Do you have a good feel for where do we stand right now?
Yeah, we're running around 38 to 40, and we're having the same problem that every volunteer fire department in the United States is having. The increased requirements for training, have been significant and have interfered with people's ability to train as well as maintain their regular job. We think there are more people out there. We think a fully paid fire chief will allow someone to concentrate more on the volunteer development issue. That was one of our reasons for doing this.
Yeah.
And they all tend to agree that they think it will help as well. But I just recall, I've heard the stories here 20 years ago, as I talked to some of the old timers in town, there were 125 people in a waiting list.
Yeah.
And that is not the case in any fire department right now. So there's an issue. The last thing we want to do is go to a fully paid fire department.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, may I have a motion to appoint him?
Make a motion?
Todd, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Any more questions? All in favor of the appointment of James Legassi as the chief of the Winchester Fire Department? Winstead Fire Department, sorry. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry,
Unanimous,
Pete.
Thank you. All right, item 9C, there's a letter regarding enforcement of regulations at Highland Lake that Jack wanted to have on the agenda, so Jack?
Yeah, I thought that the letter from Shirley Allshouse that was sent to all of us ought to at least be on the agenda for consideration, and primarily because her requirements are, or her recommendations are, the enforcement is probably too late this year, but she notes in her letter violations, the lack of continuation of statute or ordinance that were enacted in 2013. She makes a pretty strong point that if we are to continue the quality of Highland Lake as a recreational place, we need to do some enforcement of the particular use of the lakefront properties. And I just felt it should be important enough to put on the agenda to talk about it and see what we need to do to see if further enforcement might be necessary.
I believe we really need to do a lot more further enforcement. Enforcement at the lake this year, you know, we're all assuming that a lot of the activity, increased activity, had to do with COVID and people didn't have anywhere to go. But enforcement has been a serious issue, and we have lacked the resources to do that. I don't think we lack the will. We absolutely lack the resources. I got the same issue in the planning department right now with the amount of enforcement that needs to go through with our building codes and the inland wetlands issue. I've talked to the mayor about enforcement. You know, the best way to get that job done, I've come to the opinion we almost need an enforcement officer who's independent of some of the other positions we have in town.
Is that like the Marine Patrol or not?
Not necessarily. Well, that's a piece, but that's not really. The enforcement is zoning enforcement, where someone, when rules are being violated, there's gigantic floats at the lake, someone needs to send them a letter and say, get the float out of there, or there's going to be a fine. Same way with the people that put up their own little buoy markers and claimed a piece of the lake for their own beach. Just as we go through with the inland wetlands and people building up to the edge of the water or making extensions to their dock without permits.
What about the Cobb? Couldn't you get together with the lakes, Bantam Lake, New Hartford Lakes, get together with other lake communities?
You could, but I believe, I've actually talked to someone who does lake enforcement,
Right.
but we've got enough overlap between our own inland wetlands issues at the lake right now that we could keep a person fully involved. And I think it'd be better to have a person who just concentrate on our properties, because they're so integrated. So many of the violations have to do with our own inland wetlands rules and regulations, as well as it creeps in, the inland wetland crosses over into building codes. So it's best to know our town and our lake, I believe.
Unique regulations of each town, right?
Well, if we're going to look at something like this, and we want to be sure that we're taking care of what happens in the next recreational year, starting in
Yeah.
March or April, we want to be sure something's in place.
We need to
And if
get
you're suggesting even an enforcement officer for some of the stuff that ZBA and planning and zoning are issuing, maybe we ought to take a look at creating a position.
I've thought about that, because we've tended to use the inland wetlands, responsibility was to pursue this, or the planning officer, or the planning commission office itself, like Pam, or the people we have down there to work with this. But this year it's been a combination of the beaches, the lake, the waterfront, the constant construction. Right now, I'm worried about inland wetlands and commission. We've got 20 items on the next inland wetlands agenda.
Right.
There's no way to get through 20 items.
Well, and all the homes that just sold in the lake, how many?
It's the walls, it's a drawdown.
And say what? Oh, the drawdown. Yeah, the drawdown has a lot to do with it.
This year's a deep drawdown.
So a lot of people
So
are,
everybody's trying to get the waterfront done, and so there's an extraordinary amount of permits because everybody waited till,
But again, it's not just having the approval, but it's also inspecting the work that's being done.
oh, yeah.
So what's the answer to move ahead so that we're not talking about this in March and April, saying, gee, we should have taken action a long time ago?
Well, normally we'd go back and do a plan. The plan will tell us how many people we need. We already know we're probably short, and I've talked to the mayor about this as well. We know we need to staff up down in the land use office. We need to staff up there. Now, should that person be the enforcement officer, or the enforcement officer plus another piece of the position? You just heard us talk about inspections on multiple units. There's a lot to do, and of course, this year, between COVID, the deep drawdown, and I'm worried about the commissions, we're getting real short. We need a quorum of at least 5 members for our inland wetlands meeting next Wednesday, I believe it is. We're worried that we won't have 5, and last thing we want to do is postpone anything.
Well, don't we have a position open in the planning
We
department?
do, and we're going to fill it. How should we fill it, and how should we describe that position became the issue. I
So
find
it's not lacking money, it's just lacking
Correct.
probably a good job description of
think
what that person should do.
a restructure of the response. The last thing I want to do again is make that person who's in charge of that office in charge of the enforcement necessarily. I think it should be separated, because we put that person in a position of conflict. He or she has to approve and deny at the same time sometimes.
Right.
So I'd like to consider separating that, because the enforcement officer is not a fun job. You got to be willing to stand up and tell people what they don't want to hear. And that's the struggle we always have in a lot of these positions. That's the struggle that Pam confronts frequently.
Well, again, I'm trying to say, so it's now October meeting. Are we still talking about this, or are we in process of trying to do something?
No, we're still talking about it. I know you'd like to say I'm doing something about it. I haven't yet, but I mean, it's definitely, it's a high priority on my agenda, because I've got people burning out if I don't do something pretty soon.
Right.
I realize
We've
that.
talked about that.
Yeah.
We burn people out because we don't have,
I mean,
we have
that's
lots
why-
of things
that's why
to do.
I brought in an extra official, okay, and that's where Bill Velosky, who's doing a great job, came from. He's been helpful because he's also one of the selectmen in the town of, where's he, Collinsville?
New Hartford.
No, Collinsville.
Collinsville?
Yeah.
Collinsville.
And so he's very experienced. I've still got Mark on crutches for another couple of months probably, so it's limited his ability to go out to be an enforcement officer. You got to move. But yeah, I got your drift. Believe me, it's an issue.
Well, and Shirley makes an interesting point here.
She has a
By
good
having
letter.
that independent person, you're not looking for people who make complaints all the time and setting up conflicts between neighbors and stuff.
Right.
But a person,
I think Shirley's letter was well done, and I don't disagree with anything she said.
all right, well, I'd like to see some action taken. I think we owe it to the people who have put effort into creating the original ordinance, and for those people who want to protect their property. And we have always said, the lake is one of our most prized possessions.
Correct.
anything else on this, anyone? Okay, we'll move to 9E, request for donation of town-owned land to Winchester Land Trust.
Okay, is what we have here for the background, there was a parcel of land that was left to the town and it was left under the auspices of being held as open space. At this stage, it doesn't generate any tax revenue for us, and it happens to be a landlocked parcel, which is, so if we're not able to be developed, but it abuts part of the Winstead Land Trust. They have requested it, and it appears to be, I had our town engineer look at it, I've looked at it, Jimmy Rollins has looked at it. We can't figure out if there's anything that we could do to create any more value in that, and we think it's a good idea to proceed with the steps in donating this land to the land trust. Attached, there's a map there you have of it. We've looked at this for almost a year. So this goes through the steps. As you know, there's steps in doing that, and I'm requesting that we go to the next steps here which is planning and zoning and to our town attorney. So I'm requesting this proceed to the next step for donation.
The thing I noticed in the deed, it says that it's supposed to be for public use.
Right.
And through the land trust, it would be public
It would be
use.
public use, right?
So it can't go to, because it's for public use and as part of the open space in a development, it can't be developed.
Can it be purchased by an abutting landowner?
No.
No way. Do we have to notify any of these abutting landowners?
Yeah, that's all part of this process, but you'll see.
Right.
But it's public
But
use.
nobody can buy it. Nobody else can buy it.
You have to be for public use.
It has to be for public use. I guess you could buy it and donate it to the public, and then you could give it to the land trust. I don't know.
I don't think so.
It'd be nice revenue generation for the town.
But if you had public use, you'd have to have liability insurance.
Yeah, so it's unlikely to fit anything other than this proposal that, because we struggle to see if we could do something with it to generate revenue. We can't find anything.
It's landlocked.
It's landlocked.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't see that is in maybe the original deed saying it couldn't be sold to anybody else. I must have missed that.
Oh, it doesn't say you can't sell it to anybody else. It doesn't say that you can't sell it to anybody
just
else.
has
It
to
just says it has to
comply.
be for public use. The deed says public use.
Ah,
You buy it, you create a double.
There you go.
How would you access it?
Helicopter, another helicopter pad.
hey,
How do we get property like this? Who votes on it? Do the selectmen vote on accepting a piece of property that's donated to the town?
I don't think so. Well, if it's donated, but if you're gonna do anything with it, then it has to be a vote.
In other towns, I think they have to accept donated.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I think you would,
This was what, when did it was way back, it was part of a Highview
1972.
development or something?
1970,
1975?
72 it said in there. Okay.
Back, because when they do like large developments, they usually do open space portion of it as part of the approval.
It kind of stops you from inheriting a Lambert K when they donate it to you. So there's a role in making sure you just don't take something. Someone has to
Why do we
check it.
have the 1.84 acres? Is that part of the Shoreham Woods, or is that, oh, that's another land trust property?
Yes.
the one in gray? Yeah, that's the Houlihan Land Trust.
Another one, this 1.84.
That other little tiny piece.
Oh, the 1 point, that's,
Another land trust property.
yeah,
Yeah, that's,
WLT.
Oh, great, thank you.
So we would need a motion to send it on to the second step, which goes to, I believe, planning and zoning and for
Right.
their,
to the attorney and P and Z.
right?
Yes.
I'll make
I move that the Board of Selectmen refer to donation of vacant property between Highview Drive and South Road, map number 43, block number 154, lot number 019X34, to the town attorney and the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and comment.
Thank you. Is there a second? Linda, thank you. Any other questions for Bob or anything else you want to know when it comes back? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of sending it to planning and zoning for review? Unanimous, thank you. Okay, item 9F, Steve?
Yeah, I'm out.
I mean, Steve, if you want to just stay in the room, that's fine. You don't have to like leave.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, you're gonna go, okay. All right, so I just want to pull up the language on that. This is what we talked about at the last meeting. I told you I would bring it forward again with within the timetable. The next step would be for us to send it to the town attorney to get his look at it and a draft of a letter requesting such a change. And as we said at the last meeting that we had, we wanted to be very narrow in scope. And so this is a proposed amendment to Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-34. The italicized words are going to be the added language that we are going to request of the legislature. That's Linda, Cheryl Heffernan from the Board of Ed, and myself met on this. So this is our draft. This is not the town attorney draft. Our town attorney would look at it. And basically, as when I brought this to you, we talked about it a little bit. This is just so we don't get a new bill on July 1st of $100,000 or whatever the amount is going to be, a surprise bill from the Endowed Academy. And that's what happened, and that's why this is brought forward, because of that trigger of that bill last July 1st, 2019 of $100,000 to the taxpayers of this town. So all we're asking for is, there's a regular language they have, so we're just asking, notwithstanding the provision of CGS 10-33 or any other section, in the event that the budget of an incorporated or endowed high school or academy is financed 80% or more by one public board of education, the tuition for that said Board of Education's pupil shall be negotiated between the respective parties. If agreement cannot be reached, then the issue shall be submitted to binding arbitration for final determination. The arbitration shall be conducted by a single arbitrator appointed by the State Department of Education. Arbitration must be concluded prior to March 15th of each year. Tuition for such incorporated or endowed academy shall be billed on a per-pupil basis and based on the number of students enrolling from the town as of October 1st of each school year. So March 15th came from our budget submission date. October 1st came from the fact that regional school districts, all the other school districts, the other endowed academies are based on the per pupil as of the October 1st date. So those all came from other areas that had already been, that are already established. So Linda, did you want to speak to it?
No, it's again, it's just an amendment to the statute. It's just for arbitration if they can't agree on an amount.
Anybody else?
I have a couple of suggestions on the wording. When you have the event of budget of an incorporated or endowed high school, maybe we should just eliminate the word high and have it school, because in the case where we're talking about their 7th and 8th grade, which is a budgetary responsibility. So the elimination of a designation of high school as opposed to just school, I think would be more inclusive.
Well, I think the reason that we put it high school is because up above it in the statute, because this is just an amendment to the statute, not a rewrite or an establishment of a statute, but just an amendment, talks only up above it about high school.
I understand, but we're asking for
This-
consideration here.
This will also be going to Kevin Nelligan.
Well, I understand
and other
Yeah.
attorneys to review, so it will be rehashed and finalized and worded correctly before it's submitted.
I have another suggestion. In the phrase, if agreement cannot be reached, should we have a date there? If an agreement cannot be reached by February 15th, March 1st, something, because otherwise you leave it too vague. And I would think you'd want to put something in there that's more definitive.
Okay, so it says arbitration must be concluded prior to March 15th. So you want
Well, I'm not sure. Again, the question is, if agreement cannot be reached, then it's going to go to arbitration. So if an agreement cannot be reached by March
I'm gonna
1st,
give- Your suggestions I'm gonna give to Kevin.
Hmm?
I'm gonna give your suggestions to Kevin, so what's your date?
well, certainly before March 15th. So I'd say March
Well, we
1st.
want the arbitration to be concluded prior to March 15th. So is that something that?
Well, you see, in that phrase, if agreement cannot be reached, then it goes to arbitration. But we don't have any date here to say when the agreement must be reached before it goes to arbitration.
Right, so she's asking you, what date do you suggest?
I'm sorry,
What date do you suggest you put it?
March 1st, February 20th? I don't know, something before March 15th.
Well, teacher contracts have certain, they have a negotiation period, then there's a mediation date, and after the mediation date, there's an arbitration date. There's numbers of days in between that. So you're suggesting maybe to follow something like that time period?
Yeah, because if you're going to tell the arbitrators have to conclude by March 15th, there has to be something that forces that prior to that date. And then I also have a difficulty with arbitration must be concluded. What if it's not?
Well, the reason for March 15th was because the school superintendent has to bring forward a budget to the.
I get that, I know the date, but what if it's not? Because once you put in a contract that says it must be, there also has to be some kind of penalty if it's not. So what happens then?
Well, arbitration has to happen. It's like a teacher's contract. They have to have it arbitrated by a certain date.
And if it's not?
Well, if it wasn't arbitrated, then either one of the parties wouldn't be following the rule on this. Right? So if they didn't follow the rule on this, I don't know what the
Well, I would think
penalty
Kevin,
would be, if there would be one, because then you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have a contract. You just sort of have to have what we have now.
I get that. I'm just asking the question of what happens if. And again, that may be a question that our town attorney or the attorney who's going to handle this will need to raise. And I understand what you said about the October 1st. So when they're looking to do a budget, and we need to see that budget by March 15th, it has to be dependent upon the enrollment of 6 months later? That's hard.
Well, it is hard, but that's what,
But it's statewide.
that's, yeah.
All the schools have to abide by that. That's something the State Board of Education mandates. October 1st, that's the date.
Well, I know, and
It's
what,
just like taxing. October 1st of 2018, that's when you get taxed on your house, so the date that you get taxed.
yeah, I get that. I'm just wondering if a better date might be
No, we
more
can't-
inclusive.
We can't change that. It's state.
Well, no, you're
statewide.
putting it in here as a recommendation. These are, as Candy said, this italic is all recommendations, right?
It's our amendment, correct.
Okay, so that October 1st, you could suggest any date.
No, Jack,
no.
they're amending the actual, they're using the dates of the state. So those dates are already, we can't change that. They're just amending.
They don't have a tool for arbitration in the statute that exists now. The entire italicized piece is to address arbitration, period. So
Well, actually, it's to make a
Well,
negotiation.
at one point, the tuition used to be charged based upon the enrollment of like January 1st. And then whatever that enrollment was in January, that's what it would be the following year, the following tax year. Because at one point, that's how the tuition was counted. Because they needed to know, well, how many students you're going to have. And you may one year have more than you accounted for, and one year you may have less.
Now it's
I'm just looking to
October
raise the question is, where does October 1st, and is that the best time?
We can't change The state sets that date.
When the town of Winchester is charged for students that go to regional school district number 7, it's based on the October 1st enrollment of.
Projected enrollment.
No,
No,
the actual October 1st enrollment at Region 7 is what is charged. So if a kid goes to school from Winston and leaves Region 7 on September 15th, then the town isn't charged for that student. But on October 1st.
Right. Just
And even the 4 towns in Region 7, on October 1st, that's when the assessment goes out to each of the towns for their portion of the student body.
Okay, let me just clarify. October 1st of 2020, this coming 15, 20, 30 days from now, right?
Yeah.
If we take the enrollment then, that would be the tuition enrollment for the 21-22 year.
Correct.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
for right now, yeah, for this current school year.
Not for the coming school year.
No, the current,
Okay, so you're always basing it upon your current enrollment for the next projected school year.
no, the current enrollment for this current year. School started 2 weeks ago, right?
But you have a budget that's already been in place based upon a tuition enrollment of numbers given back in March.
Correct. That's your projection, yes. And that's the problem that all budgets have. The town budget, like the trees, we were talking about the trees before, right? So we do a budget based on the number of trees we think we have that we have to fix, take down, replace, whatever. And then the storm comes, and now we have a new issue with trees. So budgets are best guesses in a lot of ways. So the same thing happened with tuition, on a certain date, because you have to have a date. Because if you don't have a date, then you're constantly trading back and forth, and if you trade back and forth, I suppose you just have to keep track of it. And then do you prorate the months, weeks, days? I mean, you could, I suppose.
Well, I know historically at one point, it was always the number of students as of the school year, like let's say January 1st. How many students do you have January 1st? That is the number that tuition will be based upon for the next school year. It was just an arbitrary date that was used
Right.
because you could have more, you could have less.
So we try to give it a rhyme and reason with October 1st, using it as what is used in other state schools. So that was the rhyme or reason. It wasn't an arbitrary date. It was a date that seems to be used, regional school districts, other districts that take people in.
Well, I think this is necessary. I'm just looking to get it more refined so that we don't have these issues coming up every year.
Right,
And-
that would be good.
Yeah?
That would be really good. That's the point of this. Is so there's no surprise tuition, that it's all in agreement, no surprises.
And before we send this to the town attorney, does the Board of Education have to also vote on it?
I know that they're talking about it because we wanted to, because they asked us. This was coming forward, here, because we had talked about certain things. So they will have it. We will send it to our town attorney if they're of the like that to let our town attorney handle it instead of their attorneys, then it will all go to Kevin.
But it's not a matter of who's attorney. I'm just wondering, did the Board of Education, like, we're going to vote on this.
Right.
Has the Board of Education voted on it?
They have this tonight, I think.
They're having the
I
same?
didn't look at their agenda for tonight. I don't. I know Cheryl said she was gonna bring, but I don't know if it got on the agenda. I didn't look at it. I've been a little busy this past 11 days. So. But this would be something from us to our town attorney.
We're voting on this based as a board of finance, because it's a financial issue.
Yeah. When do we expect to have him return it?
Well, on my original timetable, I think I said what, like a couple weeks,
Right,
2 weeks.
okay.
The idea is to have this in place for when the legislative session or when the legislators are elected. Because from what I understand or how I watch things happen, is that they all start with their bills when it first comes to their first sessions, they have them in place already. So Kevin would have to do it, then has to come back to us to vote for, to take what Kevin drafts for us. Once we agree to it, then we send it to whoever's elected, and we say, we would like you to, take a look at amending the statute and talk to those legislatures. They would look at it, and they would, if they have questions or whatnot, that would happen. And then the legislative session starts usually, in January, end of January?
Yeah, but they submit bills before then.
Right, so the bills have to come before that. That's why we can't wait for the session to start and try to bring something forward. It has to be before that. And I don't know if there's any other educational stuff coming from anywhere else. I just know that I think it's just a narrow focus of this tuition, because I think that's, as Candace said, as the Board of Finance, I think that's our look, is that here's the town approves the budget, we go through all this, and all of a sudden, it's something different, and that wasn't expected. And so this would eliminate the unexpected, and the taxpayers would be protected in this, of not having that surprise. And also, with negotiating arbitration, I don't know which way arbitration's gonna go, I don't know. That's what you don't know. It's supposed to be a fair way to look at proposals. And when you have arbitration, if it gets that far, because the idea is to have it settled before you get to an arbitrator. But teacher contracts, other contracts, when you have arbiters, sometimes people are happy, sometimes they're not. But at least it was try to be a fair shot at things, so.
Yeah, as I said last time, I think we need something like this. Have we talked to the current representative and state senator? Are they supportive of something like this?
I did not talk to them about the specifics of this. I just gave them a heads up that we were gonna be talking about it, and it was gonna come to them. I just didn't want them to be blindsided by having so I just had a conversation, just saying, the board's gonna be looking at it, and then we'll be bringing it to you. And they said to me, and it was interesting, well, we don't know if we're gonna be the ones sitting there on November 4th. So there's nothing formal you can ask anybody to do until after that date. And there's nothing formal that can't come from here. But there's also nothing hidden here. There's nothing hidden on this. I don't know how many times, that I want to be very clear about that. I've been very clear about this.
No, I think,
So
I don't see anything hidden here. Last question, did you put the word in single arbitrator? Most arbitrations are done by 2 or 3 people.
Well, I would think Cheryl put that word in, and I believe that not everything is by multiple arbiters, like contracts and stuff. I think in the state, I've been out for 4 years now, so the state, if I remember in contracts, there's 3 arbitrators that are listed, and the parties agree to one of them. So there's,
Okay.
if I remember correctly, there's 3, and one of them becomes the arbitrator based on, I think, both parties say, I think, who they want.
Except this one says appointed by the State Department of Ed, so the other 2 parties would not be a part of choosing that arbiter.
Right. Jack, Kevin's gonna look at it, It's also, if it goes to the state legislature, some things are gonna move as well on it, I would imagine.
Well, you put this in front of us so we could talk about it, right?
But, so I don't have the answer for you.
We're not looking for a formal, I'm just raising questions about what's here. Not saying it's not right, I'm saying, yeah, we ought to have something like this. I'm just asking questions regarding some of the detail of it. So that when Kevin looks
I
at it.
believe we put the appointment by the State Department of Education for an arbitrator, because somebody has to appoint them. And I believe it was trying to find a party that was not us or not the academy. So I believe that's what that's an attempt at, is to have somebody that decides it, that's not us. If you think it should be language that says there's a panel of 3 and the 2 sides agree to 1, but then you get into I don't like those two, I only want this one, and the other person says, well, I don't like that one or that one, and then there's anybody agrees on. But I don't know if that can happen with three. But
Well, from you're talking about, contracts and arbitration, that happens often. That,
Right, so I
it's
wrote
hard
that-
to agree upon a single arbiter, I
So I
understand
wrote
that.
that down for Kevin.
All right. As long as he's looking at that, and we're gonna, before it goes anywhere beyond that, Kevin will be back to us and we'll have some formalization.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I would not send it off without us formally doing it, but I will ask for a motion to approve to send this to Kevin with the,
I'll make a motion to, send a proposed amendment to the Connecticut General Statute, section 10-34, to Kevin Nelligan for review,
with Jack's
with Jack's amendment.
questions.
Just questions, not amendments, just questions.
Can I have a second?
I'll say.
Thank you, Linda. So the questions that Jack brought up, Sheila, was in the amended section, should it be just school or high school, like it is up above in the original amendment, original statute?
Have to reach by when?
And an agreement to be reached by a certain date, should there be a certain date in there versus just leaving it open? Jack also wanted to know, what if an arbitrator didn't complete the work by March 15th? The other one was, do we have to follow the October 1st enrollment date? And should it be a single arbitrator appointed by the state BOE or something else?
Good, thank you.
Anything else from anybody? All in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. So our next item is, let me just check this off, is a virtual net metering credit purchase and sales agreement. And this is the solar project that's going in, so Bob?
Right.
Waiting for Steve.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. What we have here is called a net metering credit purchase and sale agreement. This is better known as Lodestar, which is the commercial name of the property owner of the 100 acres on Platt Hill, which came to the town with the proposal to put a solar panel project in the center of that 100-acre property. So there's 100 acres on Platt Hill that was purchased by Trade Wind Farms Association LLC, which is virtually Lodestar Corporation. So what they proposed here is that they were going to develop. I think there were 3 plots that totaled 5.5 acres. Take that away from the 100.5 acres, there's 95 acres. They're proposing on approximately 12 acres of the land to put in a solar project, which is to be located almost in the center of the property. My first response was they came and made a presentation. I wouldn't call it a public presentation, but a mini presentation to several of us here in the town of what they wanted to do. My first reaction was a little negative. I wanted to do a lot more examination of their proposal, which we have done here. But there were many residents in the region, in the Winchester area, who were not happy with the concept. I call it the NIMBY, not in my backyard approach, which I can't blame them. Initially, I like living in the country too. But they're proposing to donate approximately 85 acres of land, 85, 86, I'm not quite sure exact acreage, but close to that, to the land trust. They want to develop the remaining acreage in the center of the property. A lot of residents put forward a petition wanting this resisted, did not want it to happen. I took that position and contacted one of the better environmental attorney firms that we know of in Hartford, who specializes in energy production or contracts associated with that, or prevention of such projects. So after learning about the Siting Council, which I had limited knowledge of, the state of Connecticut has something called the Siting Council, as in a particular site. The state of Connecticut has passed state legislation that says the Siting Council can review plans put forward by companies who want to generate electricity and give credit backs to towns as part of their developmental plans, that if it's beneficial to the state, they can approve such a project if it's not detrimental. And their definition of detrimental has to do with the removal of a plant or animal species on the property as the primary concern, but there were some other marginal concerns, how it impacted the neighborhood in terms of visual effect, traffic, and things of that nature. So what it came down to, I talked to the attorneys first about how they could stop this. They evaluated it, came back to me and said, Bob, we'd love to spend your money, but there's no way you can stop this from happening if the environmentalists review the site and say that it's not detrimental to plant or animal species. And then the other engineers can look at it and say if it's not detrimental to the neighborhood in terms of visibility, safety, traffic, the Siting Council will take all that in consideration and decide whether to approve or not approve such a project. This year, there were approximately a dozen projects that were reviewed, windmills, solar panels, I think water generation of electricity. So this is only solar panels. I took Jimmy Rollins, myself, and our town engineer. We walked the entire area to be developed, the 10 acres within there. We spent 2 or 3 hours, I think, one hot summer afternoon looking at the property to see what kind of damage we thought might occur. So basically, the Siting Council approved it. The owners come back to us and said, the advantage we have here is the total revenue generated off of this current piece of land in terms of real estate taxes is approximately $3,000, all 100 acres. Under this plan, they would give us $15,000, which is only the minor part. That would cover that would cover property, which would be the solar panel themselves and the real estate. That'd be about $10,000 in panels. They give us $5,000 in real estate on only the piece of land that they're developing. But the big kicker here is the tax credits we get off of our electrical bill, which is included in this package here, which amounts to approximately between $40,000 and $50,000 a year for 20 years. So you're talking about almost $1 million in net revenue for the town. So it's certainly appealing financially for us. And I think and then plus the $15,000 a year in property tax, property and real estate tax. So financially, this is a very good deal. In terms of how do you feel if you're a neighbor to this property, it'll have one small road leading into it. The company has to maintain the property and the small road that's built there for maintenance. I think you've all seen what solar panels look like when they're mounted on the ground. So someone has to cut the grass around them, occasionally maybe maintenance if there happens to be some sort of storm that caused damage. But that parcel of land will be cleared of any trees and flattened where the panels will be located. It won't be visible to anyone that we can tell. So all I could tell you is I went with the environmental attorneys I talk with, also have degrees in environmental science as well as law degrees, and the firm is pretty Carmody Law out of Hartford. We've worked with these people before on some of the other property we've had here in town with their environmental issues. They're some of the best. Kevin Nelligan, our town attorney, agrees. So what we have here is about a 38-page document. We went back and forth over several weeks, probably a couple of months, making sure, exactly what would happen. What if these people build this and they sell it the next year, or what are all the possibilities that could occur that could negatively impact us, and we believe we've covered everything. So we've got the revenue generation, which could vary a little bit depending upon what they sell energy back to Eversource. So I am sure electrical fees change occasionally, the price may move occasionally, but generally this is in the ballpark with a minimum floor which is established here in this contract. So I put the contract in here. I don't expect you to understand the whole thing. I think I understand as much as I can after going over this over and over, so many red lines and developments. We probably had 7 or 8 generations of this contract. So I think we've covered everything. It's a financial boon for the town. I don't think it's detrimental to the residents in the area, and it certainly adds open space all around it, approximately 85 acres for the land trust. Is what we would lose sometime in the future. Originally, that was going to be a developmental project for homes. I can't remember how many, but a lot of homes. So there's different ways you can view this. So it doesn't allow for housing development in the future, since it's now going to be owned by the land trust primarily. At the end of 20 years, these solar panels wear out. They have a life. At the end of 20 years, they're probably done. This contract includes removal, maintenance. So we think we've covered it from cradle to grave. So at this stage, I'm proposing, that you approve this net metering credit purchase and sale agreement by Lodestar Energy. So it's extensive. We've done a lot of work, and I want the people in Winchester to understand we offered all the resistance that was possible. Our attorneys told us we were wasting any more money trying to go any further than this. They're experts at this, and I've talked to many other towns that have done this. I can't see how we could come up with a better agreement, and one with minimal damage to any property, and certainly none that would be visible. I had to look at it myself personally. I live in the country. I live in the country because I want to be out in the country, and I want trees and grass and quiet and solitude. This thing doesn't make noise. It's not a windmill. It'll have minimal amount of traffic out there to maintain it. It won't be a lot. There'll be probably less traffic than there is now with people hunting on the property or wandering about on it. I think this is the best deal I could figure how to get. Any questions?
Clarification.
Say again? Okay.
Clarification. So they're going to pay $15,000 a year in property tax,
Property and real estate.
property and real estate tax.
Correct.
So it'd be, okay, a total of 50. And this $40,000 to $50,000 a year in tax, estimated savings.
Correct.
On page 31 and 35, you show the accounts that these would be applied to?
Correct.
Well, there's one at least, Bachelor. That's closed, and we don't intend to keep Bachelor.
That'll change out to the next school that takes its place.
So we need another public building in that?
No, if it's not there, we had to come up with approximately 8. If it's not that, we'll substitute a different one for that. But we had to give them what we had now in order to estimate the bills. If there would be another facility, it would be in that range of electrical consumption.
So by approving this,
It doesn't
not-
have to be Bachelor.
these are flexible.
Yes, these are
Accounts.
beneficial counts. They had to have a definition to start with in order to make a financial calculation of kilowatt hours.
Okay, because, yeah, we certainly don't need to include Bachelor. And why do we have 2 town halls, Town Hall 5 and Town Hall 8? Why are there 2 town halls?
We've got one, has to do with all our lighting. You see, in Town Hall, we probably get a dozen electric bills every month. So the biggest ones, we pick out the 2 biggest ones, electrical usage for the building, the major usage, and then the lighting. All the lights will run on a separate bill.
And like instead of Bachelor, we could use the senior center?
Yeah, good, but that uses very little electricity.
Would one of the senior housing projects work?
We don't own them.
It's not a public building.
And we went through, we really went over called this list to come up with the biggest usage we could come up with to maximize
The
it.
solar panels are gonna be up and running before the move from Bachelor
Yeah.
to Hinsdale.
Yeah, we're not using much
At the rate-
electricity from Bachelor right now anyway, it's closed, so.
Who's
Well, this
closing?
is based on the annual usage, so this is calculated all the seasonal aspects.
Bachelor's open.
I just want to make sure that in approving this, we're not locking ourselves into these 8 accounts,
No,
that we have flexibility.
we do.
Change the account number to a different name. The account number would remain the same, the school would just be identified differently. It's a ledger number.
This had to do with the percentage, and this is how it has to be allocated, because the state has to see that it is, the town has exercised where they'd like the money to go. But it stays open, and that's, I mean, we did talk about that, it's probably in here somewhere, if I
Yeah,
can't
we-
remember what page that one's on, but
I mean, the fire department buildings and stuff like that.
they're not heavy usage. They're not heavy usage. So these, it's what you want to do is pick out the heaviest usage.
To be able to get to the 50,000.
Yeah,
They have to give us a certain percentage.
I get that.
So we can substitute any building, these were the ones that, we tried to get the fewest number of buildings, because we have to, each bill will have to be calculated every month.
Right.
But there's a process to do that. So Bruce and I have gone over all of that.
Well, Bob, I don't want to leave any money on the table.
Yeah, believe me, we're not. I don't think we are.
All right.
Because we're going from 3,000 in property taxes to 15,000.
Yeah, that's a given. It's this metering credit. That's where we make our money, saving money on the tax, on the electric bill every month.
And our financial investment in this has been the legal cost. And I even had in there, if something goes wrong, I want the legal cost back. So I think we've got it covered.
All right.
Bob, what happens after 20 years?
After 20 years, there's a disposal fee. At the end of 20 years, they still own the land. But
Right,
they have to,
they might have to,
they have to get rid of the equipment, or whoever owns it. I guarantee you, these guys will flip this. There's no way they're gonna own this for 20 years. Matter of fact, the most likely buyer would be Eversource. But at the end of 20 years, they have to get rid of the equipment and pay to dispose of it all.
And any damage, storm damage, they take care of everything.
All theirs. We don't do any of that.
So our involvement financially after this is 0.
Correct.
And is Eversource the only, they're only going to sell to Eversource? The private residents can't,
No, you can't, this can't be tapped into by individuals.
yeah,
That's why Eversource, I think, is gonna be keen to make sure that that can't happen,
yeah.
would be my guess.
I think that's just generally what happens. The utility companies end up buying these things after so many years. If Eversource still exists. Of course, it could be broken apart.
How well would that work for AT&T? Okay. Anyway, I can't imagine, we spent a lot of time on this. I don't know what the total legal costs are. We spent some money doing this too. But I think we were dealing with some of the best people possible legally and environmentally. We hired an environmentalist in addition to the attorney to go up there, and he or she, the team went up there personally and scoured the whole property to make sure that there were any implications that we didn't miss.
I would move approval of the proposal.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions for Bob?
No, just a comment. When I first saw the project, I figured this would be controversial. But when you think about, as you drive around the country, you'll see big fields of solar panels, not particularly attractive looking. This is a case here where virtually no one's going to see these panels. They're not going to make any noise, not going to harm the environment otherwise, so it's a pretty easy deal for us, I think.
You gotta have this in a windmill. Yep.
Bob, just a curiosity question. So how do we measure the fact that we're getting that kind of net savings? Do we compare each?
Oh, yeah,
Like-
each bill will come in. It'll show what the total bill would be and then minus the credit.
The bill will show that
yeah.
for each of these accounts.
We have to submit paperwork to that effect. Well, this is all very traceable. And I've checked with 3 other towns that have done this, and 2 of them with the same company.
Suffield, I understand, I've been to their fields,
Yeah, we
huge,
spent a lot of time making sure that there wasn't a shell game here.
yeah. When do they expect to start construction?
They said they wanted to start this year, but I think they might be dreaming of running out of time. But the sooner the better, but they wanted to, this is now September. They estimated 4 months to do this thing, I don't know. To me, the land itself, I hate to see them tear that up, even though no one sees that land as beautiful terrain, and the whole 100 acres is beautiful. But they're gonna have to cut down a lot of trees and remove a lot of rock, and they have to make sure all the drainage is correct. That was a big issue, because that water drains, that's on the
Right.
hill. They had to have to lay all that out with their environmental people, and they haven't completed that yet. So the planning of this thing, I assume, is gonna take several weeks with engineers who understand land, water flows, and so.
And we don't, planning and zoning, or nobody has any say on how that's laid out for drainage?
No, but they will show us all the plans to make sure that we're in agreement, and they know if it causes any damage, and that's what's all in this contract, they cannot damage the rest of the property, nor will the land trust. That's another advantage, of the land trust will not allow them to do that either.
Yeah, the concern was the downhill drainage, and whether it would create,
We walked it all, looked at it
Runoff.
to see where it was, and, yes, so
Yeah.
it's,
Is there a time frame?
well, we said to start, when I call them, I'll call them this week,
Did
and
they-
they're gonna tell me the time frame because they're engineering studies. They don't know exactly how long their engineers will take to lay it out because of the terrain. They have to remove trees and some boulders
So
and
by
rock.
spring?
Pardon?
By
Oh,
spring?
by spring, they'd certainly like to have it done by the end of spring, they said, but it depends on the winter conditions again, because this is all outside construction.
So next summer, it should be up.
Yep. So if the winter comes late, they'll have it done. But it's very weather controlled in terms of the construction.
So, if there's no more questions, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next up is citizens' comments. If you have any comments, you can speak now here in person or 738-6958. Seeing none, we move on to 11, Selectmen's comments and reports. One thing I'd just like to ask everybody to do is to fill out their census forms, or when a census person comes to your house, to please, answer their questions for them. And the reason for this is, well, every 10 years, based on the Constitution, we count everybody in the United States. That information stays with the census. It does not go out to any other federal agency or anywhere else. But the numbers of people that are located in Winstead count towards school lunch funding, towards other federal programs that come into town through transportation. The state uses the census data to determine grants, loans, et cetera, to us. So the data is really important in terms of per person that's counted here in Winstead, or any town, actually, for that matter. We also know that it draws up congressional districts, but I don't think that's what, I'm so worried about. As much as I'm worried about our schools being able to get all the funding they could get with the correct count. If we are undercounted and other towns are bigger, they will get some of our share of money. So if you know anybody that needs to, hasn't filled out the census, I know around my house, up at the lake, we've had the census enumerators coming in, even though I thought I sent them all by the 2020 census online. There's a website you can go to and stuff, but they've been around, so if you see them, try to help them out and fill out the information, because again, it's for the benefit of the town, in terms of grants and things that we would be eligible for. So please do what you can to fill out the census.
I want to make a couple of remarks. I know it's getting late, and everybody wants to get out of here, so I'll keep these brief. First, how do I want to say this? I enjoy a good fireworks display, but everyone around town, I've seen a lot of complaints all over social media. I understand that people are stressed out for the whole COVID thing, being out of work, reduced hours, things like that, masks. Show some restraint and kind of restrain yourself with your fireworks displays. I've heard some comments of them early morning hours, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, think of others. And, you know, fireworks are against the law in Connecticut, so, you know, if we need to examine an ordinance with hefty fines, you know, that's what we have to do, but, you know, just show some restraint for yourselves. Secondly, don't forget this Friday, we have an important anniversary coming up. September 11th, 2001. First time in American history, other than Pearl Harbor, there was attack on American soil. This is something that we never thought could happen here. We saw it on the TV often, but we never thought it could happen here until September 11th. Outside of the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, there's a plaque. And this brings up the embodiment of what happened on September 12th when America came together and we became one. We stopped being Democrats and Republicans. We became Americans. It's called Angels of Freedom. Few can begin to understand what drives men to such acts of desperation, but the world must now know the resolve of the great nation is both unshakable and unstoppable. This day, ordinary Americans took extraordinary steps to help their fellow Americans, and by doing so gave the ultimate sacrifice. And so, those Angels of Freedom stand not as a memorial to those who died, but rather as a celebration of their lives for which we will forever be in their death. God bless the families and friends of the true heroes of September 11th, 2001. Now, in relation to that, I'd like the board to, at our next meeting, I would like us to consider October 4th through October 10th to be First Responders Week, with one day in the week for each organization: Winstead Fire, Winstead Ambulance, and the Winchester Police Department recognized one day during those weeks. And that's what I'll end on.
So, you want us to, at our next meeting, have an agenda item to officially
Yes, please.
declare it?
Yep.
And then do you have any specific, well, if you have specific days of that week you want for those, let us
Right,
know.
I'll bring that to the next meeting.
Yep. And then we'll do the proclamation for it.
Yes. Thank you.
So if you get some words for that.
Will do.
Anything else? If not, Steve,
Move we adjourn.
give a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Todd. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
Using money for the celebration.
We appreciate you.
Monster energy drink. Already got two in my refrigerator waiting. My heart may explode, but
And he never responded.
You told me sometimes get lost.
Right, so probably what's gonna happen is I'm gonna end up signing things, because Philip is also sort of disappeared from Winchester 250. And I knew that this would happen. I knew it. So what we'll do at our next meeting is make the approval for it.
Somebody who was a fan,
Huh?
put somebody in the band for the opening ceremony.
Right, so we'll be using that account, we just have to, the committee